Hi, welcome to CGDive. This is part 2 of the Blender to Unity character workflow. Please watch part 1 if you're interested in the rigging portion of this project, which was done in Blender. I also want to remind you that in this Unity project, we'll be using the generic animation type. Humanoid will be handled in a separate video. Here is a quick view of the characters we'll set up by the end of this session. And by the way, all of my videos are sponsored by you. Thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing to the channel. That means a lot to me. And if you want to support CGDive even further, you can buy my courses and add-ons on Gumroad. You get 20% off with coupon code CGDive, or you can also become a patron. Okay, let's start work in Unity now. And we are going to start from scratch. Here I have the Unity Hub application, and I'm going to start a new project by clicking New. Notice my Unity version. I'm using the current LTS version. But what we are going to do is not going to be very complicated. So I believe you'll be able to follow with any recent version of Unity and even with future versions. Something else that you have to consider are the pipelines that Unity offers. And that can be a big frustration for people new to the engine, but that is a separate topic. So here we're going to keep things simple and go with the standard 3D pipeline. I'm going to name my project generic workflow or something like that and create it. And here we are in a fresh Unity scene. We have a light source and a camera, and that is a good start. So we are going to be creating a character and setting them up as third-person characters. So right away, let's give them something to stand on. In the hierarchy view, I'm going to right-click and choose 3D object and create a new plane. If the plane is not in the center of the world, reset the position, and then I'm also going to give it a larger scale, something like 10 by 10 on the X and Z axis. And then we can move on with importing the characters. So first I'm going to import and set up the humanoid character. Again, even though it's humanoid, we're going to set it up as a generic character. And I'll go in as much detail as I can over this first character, and then we'll quickly set up the other two characters in the same way. I'm going to create a new folder in the Asset Manager and call it Crypto, which was the name of my character. Here I have my FBX files. I'm going to grab the Crypto FBX and drop it into the Crypto folder. Unity makes it very easy to import files like this. If I click on this new asset that we created, Unity will present me with the FBX options for this imported model. And also if I click on this little triangle here, this will expand and show me the data that was exported with this FBX. As you can see, we have a material, a character mesh, and the actions that we exported out of Blender. So now I'm going to click on the FBX asset and start setting it up. In the Model tab, we're going to leave everything to default. These settings can be useful, but for this project, the defaults will do nicely. Then we'll move to the Rig section. And as I already said, we'll be using the generic animation type. Under Avatar Definition, we're going to create from this model and click Apply. And that added a new avatar in our FBX data. What is an avatar? In the Unity documentation, you can find the definition that it is an interface for retargeting one skeleton to another. So basically, it's a representation of your character's bone structure that can be reused in Unity. Back to the FBX asset, we're going to go to Animation. And here you can leave everything to default. But a quick tip, if you ever find that your character's feet are sliding, or you notice any other glitches in your animations, you can try turning off Resample Curves. I'm going to turn it back on again, but try disabling it if you find any animation problems. And also, Animation Compression you can turn off, and that may clean up some of these glitches. But I'm going to keep the default settings in this case. And at the bottom of the animation menu, you'll see the clips. These are basically the actions that we exported out of Blender. Blender calls them actions. Unity calls them clips, but it's the same thing. And notice the order in which they appear here. And if we compare that to the order in which we place the actions in Blender's NLA, you'll see that it is the exact same order. So the NLA is a great way to not only control what will be exported, but also in which order. At least that's how it works for Unity. If you click any of these clips, you'll get additional options for them. And one option that will enable for some of these clips is loop time, but we are going to do this later. I want you to see how this option affects what will happen in the game. And finally, we have the materials tab. A material was imported with the FBX file, so I'm going to extract it by clicking on this button. And then I'll click select folder to extract it in the same folder as the FBX file. And here's the material. I'm going to rename it to something like MAT crypto. And if I click on my crypto asset, you'll see that this same material is applied here in the material slot. So let's set up this material. I'm going to create a new materials folder and move my material over there. And I'll also import the character's textures by simply dragging and dropping them into Unity. For this character, I just have two textures, an albedo texture and a normal map. For the normal map, I need to change the texture type from default to normal map and apply. And what is important about this albedo map is that it also contains the smoothness map. So in Photoshop or another image editing software, you need to create an alpha slot and place a black and white smoothness map there. And then save your file as a TGA or something else that supports alpha. Then in my material, I'm going to drag and drop the albedo into the albedo slot and then change the source from metallic alpha to albedo alpha, so that the alpha that is contained in the albedo will be used as smoothness. And then I'll drop the normal map into the normal map slot. Also, this material that I extracted has an emission color. I'm going to set it to black so that there is no emission. And my material will be set up. Here's the character, and I'm actually going to drop it into the viewport and reset its position. And press F to zoom on it. And here is the character with the material set up. Now this pure white color on the ground is a little bit hard to work with. So let's go into the top asset folder and create a new material. Call it ground. Give it a grayish color and reduce the smoothness a little bit and just drop it onto the ground. And now things are a little bit easier to see. So now our basic scene is ready and we can start setting up the character. We're going to need a bunch of components and a special script to make things work. Here is a graph that will give you a broad idea of what we are going to do. We are going to add a couple of components to our character asset, an animator, a capsule collider, and a rigid body component. We are also going to add a camera in the hierarchy of this character asset. And we are going to add a special camera pivot object, which will improve the behavior of our third-person camera. We are going to set up some inputs in the input manager. This will allow us to easily define keyboard and mouse inputs that we can use in our project. We are also going to use an animation controller, which will make the character play the animations that we created in Blender. And the final component is a custom script that I call character movement. And this script will be the glue that connects all of these components together. So let's do it, and I hope it will make perfect sense as we progress. Let's focus on the inputs first. I'm going to go to Edit, Project Settings, and go to the Input Manager. Unity creates these 18 so-called axes by default, and they are very practical. A lot of them we'll actually be able to use in our project. For example, horizontal and vertical will allow us to move our character back and forth, left and right, with the WASD keys. The jump one can be used to set up a jump action when we press the spacebar, and mouse X and mouse Y will help us use our mouse as input. In our case, we'll use that to control the camera and the orientation of the character. So if you remember the actions that I created in Blender, our character can walk, run, and crouch. And I also created this special action. In the case of the humanoid character, he stretches his arm, the dragon kind of raises his wing, and so on. So let's set up some inputs that will allow us to perform these actions. We are not going to be using the fire 1, 2, and 3 inputs, so I'm going to repurpose them here. Fire 1 will become run. And if you're going to use my script, which I'll share with you, make sure that you set the exact same name. In this case, it is run with a capital R. And for the positive button, we have to type left shift. So unfortunately, Unity makes you type out these buttons manually, and in the documentation, you'll find a list of all of the possible buttons that you can choose from. But anyway, that will work. Fire 2, I'm going to set to crouch. And the button will be left control, so left CTRL. And finally, Fire 3 will be my special action, which I'll name special. And for the positive button, I'm going to use the Q key. You can choose any key that you like. So this way we set up inputs that will be easily able to access in our custom script, and they will help us move our character, make it run, jump, crouch, and so on. Okay, I'll close the project settings. And next, let's set up the main game components that our character will need. So I'm going to click on the crypto character in the hierarchy. And I already have the first component that I'm going to need, the animator. In case you don't have it, just click on add component and look for animator and choose it from here. And also, if you don't have the avatar set up, click here and choose the character avatar. The next component that we are going to need is a capsule collider. Make sure that you use the standard one, not the 2D one. And that added this capsule to our character. We need to make it cover our character better, so let's do that right away. I'm going to click on this Z gizmo here, and then on the little cube, and that will put me in front orthographic view. If I click on Edit Collider now, I can grab the top of the capsule collider and move it around the area of the top of the head of the character, and then grab the bottom and place it close to the feet of the character. Then I'll play with the radius here until it looks something like this. I want it to cover my character nicely, and I don't want it to be too thin or too thick. Then I'll press the cube again and go back to 3D view. And the next component that I'm going to need is a rigid body. Again, not the 2D one, but the standard one. And here, on the constraints, I want to freeze rotation on X, Y, and Z. The rigid body component will basically give physicality to the capsule collider, and it will make it react to gravity and stuff like that. However, if we don't freeze the rotations, this oval shape of the collider can slide and make the character tumble, and we don't want that. We want the character to be stable and stand straight. And the final component that we are going to need will be our custom script. However, we are going to get back to that in a minute. First, I want to attach a camera to this character. And if you remember our graph, we are also going to use a special object that will become the pivot of this camera. I'm going to expand the hierarchy of my character, right click on it, and add a new empty object. And I'm going to name it camera pivot. The name is not that important. I just want it to be clear what it does. And then I can drag and drop the main camera from my scene onto this new empty object, and that will parent the camera to the empty. So make sure that the hierarchy is exactly like this. And by the way, if you don't have this camera, you can easily add it manually. So I'm going to delete the camera, select the empty object, right click on it, and add a new camera. And just for good measure, I'm going to tag it as main camera. So now we have the camera pivot and the camera. And now I want to move the camera into place behind the character. Maybe point it downwards a little bit. And if I hit play, this camera position looks good to me. So I can move forward. So we have almost everything to make this character work. The final component that we need is a custom script that will connect all of these components that we created. We are also going to need an animation controller, but let's take it one step at a time. I'm going to leave that for a little bit later. And now let's introduce the movement script. So I'm going to create a new folder here, call it script. And I'm going to import this script that I prepared in advance in this folder. And I'm placing this script here because it will be reused for all of the other characters that we'll set up later. I'm going to share this script with you. Just keep in mind that it's not something that you should be using in production. It's just a quick hack, just enough to make things work in Unity so that we can test our characters. So now I need to add it to my character asset, and there are two ways to do it. I can simply drag the script and drop it onto the crypto asset. And here is the script. And if I remove it, I can also click Add Component and look for movement, character movement, and edit this way. And as you can see, the script gives you a little bit of control of your walking speed, running speed, crouch speed, mouse sensitivity, and how high your character can jump. You can play with these, but the defaults will work well for me, so I'm probably going to leave them like this. But one thing that we need to set up is the camera pivot. Otherwise, the camera movement portion of the script will not work correctly. So all I need to do is to grab my camera pivot empty object and drop it into this camera pivot slot. And now if I play the game, thanks to the script, I'm able to rotate the camera and move around. But now the scene that I have is too bare, so it's kind of hard to say if I'm even moving or not. So let's go out of game mode. You'll have to press escape to show the mouse cursor because I hide it with the script. So I'm going to add a couple of random objects to the scene to create the sense of space. I'll just add a new cube, reset the position, and on Y I want to put it to 0.5 so that it's exactly on the ground. Move it around a bit. Control D to create a copy and move it around a bit. Control D again, Control D again, Control D again. So something like this. And I'm also going to create copies of this ground material and rename them. Give them random colors and apply them to the cubes. Okay, now if I hit play, it's easier to understand that I'm moving, and I can also kind of jump on top of these cubes. So obviously now my character is moving physically inside this map, but it is not performing the animations. That is because we need to set up our animation controller. But first, let's have a quick look at the movement script. So I'm going to double click it and open it in Visual Studio. Okay, here is the script, and we are not going to write it line by line. This is not this kind of tutorial. There are better tutorials for that. I'm also not going to waste too much time explaining each line. Again, this is not something that you'll want to use in serious projects, but it will do the trick here, and it will allow us to see our characters in action. In this state of the script, I have commented out everything that has to do with the animator. This is the part of the system that actually plays the actions that we created in Blender. Otherwise, Unity would spit out a lot of warnings. But now we are going to start working on the animation controller, so I'm going to uncomment these parts of the script. And save it. Okay, now if I play the game, we'll get lots of warnings in the console. And that is because the script is trying to set up properties for an animation controller that doesn't yet exist. So let's go to our project. And in my character folder, I'm going to right click and create a new animation controller and call it Anim Crypto or something like that. I'll double click the controller. And here we can set up transitions between our animations and also under what conditions they'll be played. So before I start setting up the animations, I want to go to my parameters and set up 4 parameters that I know that I'm going to need. I'll need a float parameter called speed, a boolean called in-air, another boolean is crouched, and a trigger that I'm going to call special. The speed parameter will control if a character is idling, walking, or running. In air will be set to true when a character is not on the ground, and that will cause the character to play the jump animation. Similarly, is crouched will be played when we press the crouch button, and that will make the character play the crouched animation. And the special will trigger a special action when we press the Q key. So I'll go back to my layers, and in my base layer, I'm going to right click, create a new state, and choose from new blend tree. I'll double click this blend tree, and I'll call it idle walk run. And when I click the blend tree, I can add motion fields. I'm going to add 3 of them. And now I want to drag my idle, walk, and run animations in these fields. If the animations are hard to see, you can hold Control and scroll the mouse wheel to go to this detailed view. And now I'm going to drag the idle into the first slot, walk into second slot, and run into the third one. I will uncheck Automate Threshold, and I'm going to leave the threshold for idle to 0. I'm going to set run to 8 and walk to 3. These values come from my walk speed and my run speed. Since I set my walk speed to 3, I'm also setting it to 3 here, and run speed to 8. So I'll also want a threshold of 8 for the full run animation. And this blending is happening based on the speed parameter that we set up here. And the speed parameter is set in our script. It is always equal to the player speed variable, which we set depending on whether we are running, crouching, or walking. So back in my base layer, I know that I also want my character to be able to jump. So I'm going to drag the jump animation into this window. And I'll right click and make transition and connect it to idle, walk, and run. And then right click on the blend tree and connect back to jump. So I'll be able to go from moving to jumping and then back again. Now I need to set up these transitions. For condition, I'm going to add a new condition and set it to in air. So when in air is true, my character will jump. And I'm going to turn off this has exit time checkbox. Then for the transition from jumping to movement, again, I'm going to turn off the has exit time, add a new condition, set it to in air and false. So when in air is false, in other words, when the character is on the ground, he'll stop jumping. Okay, I also want my character to be able to crouch. So I'm going to right click, create a new blend tree, call it crouching, enter it, create 2 motion fields, and I'll drag my crouch idle into the first one and crouch walk into the second one. Uncheck automate thresholds and set the walk threshold to 2, which is my crouch walk speed. Go back to the base layer, and I'm going to create transitions from walking to crouching and back. I'm not going to create transitions from jumping to crouching because I decided that I don't want such a behavior in this project. That is even reflected in the script. If you look at the jump behavior, in order for the character to jump, I need to press the jump button and I need to be grounded, which is checked with this function here. And I also want to be not crouching. That is one of the conditions for jumping in my script. Okay, let's set up the transitions. I want to turn off has exit time, add a new condition, set it to is crouched, and to go from crouching to walking, I'll add a condition again, set it to is crouched and switch it to false. So when I'm not pressing the crouch button, I'll go back to walking and idling and turn off has exit time again. Now, if I play the game, nothing will happen yet, and that is because we haven't applied this animation controller that we created. So select the character asset, take the animation controller and drag it into the controller slot of the animator. Now if I play the game, my character is idling. If I press W, he'll start walking and freeze into a weird pose. If I press Shift and W, he'll be running, but again, the pose is frozen. If I jump, he'll play the jump animation, and if I press the Control key, he'll crouch. And again, if I try to crouch walk, he'll freeze into place. The reason he's freezing is that we didn't set our looping animations as such. I'm going to select my character in the asset browser and go to my animation settings And I'm going to want to set a few of the animations as looping animations. These will be the walk, just tick the loop time option, run, idle, crouch walk, and crouch idle. And then I'll hit apply. Okay, now if I play the game, my character can walk and he won't freeze. Running works as well. Crouch walking. So the character can perform the main actions that we intended for him. Now we want to set up the so-called special animation. For that, I'll go back to the animator, and we don't want to combine the special action with this action on the base layer. Instead, we want to create a new animation layer, and that will allow us to play this special animation on top of any of these states that we have on the base layer. So on the layers, press the plus button and create a new layer, and we can call it special. And under the layer settings, I want to set weight to 1 so that this layer will be accessible at all times. So now if I take my stretch animation, which is my special animation, and just drag it over here in the special layer, it will become the default state of this layer, and I won't be able to control the transition to this state. So first I'm going to right click here, create state, and create a new empty state, and this empty state will become the default state for this layer. And then I'm going to drop the stretch animation over here and create transitions in both directions. And for the transition into the stretch animation, I'm going to create a new condition and set it to my special toggle property. Also, I want to untick has exit time. And now if I play the game and press Q, the character will play the special animation, but the whole character goes into the default pose rather than mixing with the other animations. To fix that, we are going to use an avatar mask. So I'm going to right click here in the asset browser and create a new avatar mask. Call it mask crypto. And then in the inspector, our character is not humanoid, so ignore the humanoid part and expand transform. I'll set the avatar to my character avatar, click import skeleton, and expand all to show all bones. I'll click toggle all to disable all bones. And now for this mask, I want to enable only the bones of the left arm. So let's try selecting the shoulder L and then shift selecting the hand L bones and then clicking here, and that will enable all of these bones. Next, in the animator, I'll click on the settings for the special layer, and under mask, I'm going to choose the mask that I just created. If I play the game now and press Q, you'll see that the arm stretches while the character is performing whatever action he's performing based on the base animation layer. So I can be walking and stretch the arm, jump and stretch, crouch and stretch, and so on. And if you remember in the rigging video, we fixed the hierarchy of this rig, and I told you to pay attention to this part. And here I'm going to edit the video and I'm going to show you what would have happened if we had not fixed this hierarchy. As you'll see, in some cases the arm may disconnect from the rest of the body, and that is because the hierarchy is not set up correctly. So that is the whole setup of the character. Now this character is fully set up. It can run around, it can jump on stuff, and it can crouch, and it can perform this weird stretching animation. And even though this stretch animation may be a little bit weird, this is actually the same approach that you could take if you had, for example, an attack animation that you want to blend with the character walking and performing other actions. Now that I'm done setting up this character, I can drag it from the scene hierarchy back to the asset manager and create an original prefab. Next, I'll quickly go over how to set up the other characters that we worked on. For the dragon, I'll create a new folder and import my FBX in it. Then I'll set up the FBX. I'll keep the model settings to default. Under rig, I'll keep animation type to generic, and I'll create a new avatar definition from this model. Since each of our characters have unique bone structure, we cannot reuse the avatars. Next, under animation, I'll enable the loop time option for all looping animations. I'll extract the material from the FBX file, name it, and import the texture. In this case, it's just one simple texture that I'm going to drop into the material albedo slot. I delete the crypto character from the scene, and in its place, I drop the dragon into the scene, and I'll start setting it up. I already have my Animator Controller. I'm also going to give it a capsule collider and tweak the shape of the collider. This capsule shape will not perfectly fit my dragon character. This is a limitation of this simple system that I created. Next, I'll also add a rigid body and freeze the XYZ rotations. And finally, I'll add my custom character movement script. In the scene hierarchy, I'll add an empty to the dragon that will act as camera pivot. And I'll also add a camera as the child of the camera pivot object. Then I assign the camera pivot object in my script, and I adjust the camera position. Next, I want to create the animation controller, and actually the one that we created for the crypto character will be perfect for this purpose. So I'm going to duplicate the crypto animation controller, move it into the dragon folder, and rename it. And then all I need to do is go into this controller and replace all clips that I use there with the corresponding dragon actions. So I'll replace the idle walk and run motions in this blend tree, also the jump motion, and the crouching actions in the crouching blend tree. In the special layer, I'll replace the stretch action. It makes more sense to name this node special. And now we are almost done. The only problem is that I'm still using the crypto avatar mask. So let's create a new mask and then activate all bones of the left wing, which is where the special animation happens. With that, my dragon is fully set up and it can perform the same actions as the crypto character. I'm not happy with the quality of these animations, but it was a quick job, and it is more important that they work in Unity. And then again, I'm going to create a prefab from this setup. So then we can set up the cheetah in the same way, import the model, set up the FBX, extract the material, and in this case, there are no textures, so that's simple. Then I can place the cheetah in the scene, add all the components that I need. Add the camera pivot and camera. And add the pivot to the script. Then I'll duplicate the animation controller, rename it, and replace all animations with the cheetah animations. And finally, create and apply an avatar mask for the cheetah with only the tail bones activated, because the special action of the cheetah is moving the tail. And now the cheetah is also fully set up. I hope you enjoyed learning this workflow for exporting rigged characters from Blender to Unity and setting them up with the generic animation type. Of course, this is not the one and only workflow, but I hope it gives you a basic understanding of the process and the tools that we can use. Feel free to tweak and expand it depending on your needs. As always, big thanks to everyone who is supporting CGDive by being involved in the channel, and special thanks to my top patrons. Please click like and subscribe, and I hope you look forward to the next video.